August 6, 1944. Dawn breaks over Cowra, New South Wales. Sergeant Ashley Cooper walks through what's left of Compound B. Bodies everywhere, some shot, some with self-inflicted wounds, some clubbed by their own comrades. 231 Japanese prisoners dead. His boots crunch on broken glass. He stops at a vegetable garden the prisoners had been tending yesterday. Tomatoes still on the vine. Carrots half pulled from the soil. Baseball gloves tangled in barbed wire where men used them to protect their hands during the breakout. He picks up a glove. It's soaked with blood. Cooper had fought in New Guinea during the First War, seen his share of death. But this is different. This wasn't combat. This was mass self-destruction. The prisoners had been fed, treated according to the Geneva Convention. No complaints had been filed, no brutality, and yet they chose to charge machine guns armed with sharpened mess knives and baseball bats. 1,104 men launched a suicide attack. They knew they'd die. That was the point. Cooper looks at the baseball glove in his hand. Yesterday, these men played a game, laughed, worked the gardens. Today, they're corpses. He doesn't understand it. Maybe he never will. But what happens next in Cowra will become one of the most unusual stories of reconciliation in modern history. Because when the killing stopped, something unexpected began. Australia made a choice. Not revenge, not forgetting, something else entirely. Within days, the question arises, what do we do with the bodies? Standard military protocol says, bury them quickly, mark the graves, move on. But the camp chaplain, Father Michael Bergen, pushes back. These men deserve proper burial, full military honors. The Australian command is skeptical. They're enemy combatants who attacked guards. 4 Australians are dead because of them. Privates Benjamin Hardy and Ralph Jones, Private Charles Shepard, Lieutenant Harry Doncaster. Why honor the enemy? Bergen doesn't back down, because that's what separates us from them. We don't abandon our values when it's inconvenient. The authorities relent. August 10, 1944. A mass funeral. The coffins are draped with white sheets. No Japanese flags available, and it would be controversial anyway. But the ceremony is dignified, respectful. Australian soldiers serve as pallbearers. They're carrying men who tried to kill them 5 days ago. Some of the Australian guards attended those funerals. They stood at attention, saluted. One soldier later writes home, "We buried them proper. Don't know why they did it, but they're soldiers like us. Deserve that much." The surviving Japanese prisoners watch from behind the wire. Silent. Some are crying, not loud, just tears. They expected execution after the breakout, expected brutality. Instead, they're witnessing their dead being honored by the enemy. One survivor, Teruo Murakami, is 19 years old during the breakout. He'll live to 98. In interviews, decades later, he remembers that funeral. The Australians didn't have to do that. They could have thrown us in a pit. They didn't. That stayed with me forever. 1963, nearly 20 years after the war. Japan approaches Australia with an unusual request. Can we establish a war cemetery on Australian soil for the Cowra dead and for all Japanese who died in Australian custody during the war? The request is politically sensitive. Memories are still raw. Australian POWs who survived Japanese camps have testified about starvation, beatings, forced labor. The Burma Railway, the Sandakan death marches. Why should Australia give land to honor Japanese dead when Japanese treatment of Australian prisoners was brutal? The debate is fierce. But Australia agrees. A plot of land near the old campsite is ceded to Japan in perpetuity. The Japanese government builds a cemetery, Buddhist architecture, stone lanterns, careful landscaping. The remains of those who died at Cowra are reinterred there, along with bodies of Japanese airmen shot down over Australia, merchant seamen, anyone who died on Australian territory. The cemetery is tended by local volunteers, Australian women, many of whom lost sons or husbands in the Pacific War, maintain Japanese graves. They place flowers, they clear weeds, they show up every week. 1979. The Cowra Japanese garden opens, not a memorial exactly, a living symbol of reconciliation. Ken Nakajima designs it in the Edo period style. It becomes the largest Japanese garden in the southern hemisphere. Cherry trees, koi ponds, meditation spaces. It's built on a hill overlooking where the camp used to be. An avenue of cherry blossoms connects the cemetery to the garden. During spring bloom, the path becomes a tunnel of pink petals. Thousands visit every year, Japanese tourists, Australian families, veterans from both sides. The Australians could have left the land empty, could have built a parking lot, could have tried to forget. Instead, they built a garden, and gardens require care, daily attention, commitment. You can't half-maintain a garden. It either thrives or dies. Cowra chose to make it thrive. 1980s, former prisoners start returning, not as POWs, as visitors. Some bring their children and grandchildren. They tour the old campsite. Only foundations remain, concrete slabs marking where barracks stood. They walk through the cemetery, find names of men they knew. One veteran places sake at a grave, traditional offering. An Australian woman, one of the volunteer caretakers, approaches. She asks if he knew the man buried there. He nods. We were in the same unit, captured together at Rabaul. She smiles gently. I've been taking care of this grave for 15 years, just wanted to do something. He stares at her. You lost someone too? Her son. Pilot shot down over New Guinea. The Japanese veteran bows deeply. I am sorry for your loss. She shakes her head. I'm sorry for yours too. They stand. There together, enemy and mother of enemy, united by grief and the refusal to let hate have the final word. The letters start in the late 40s and never stop. Former prisoners writing to former guards, thanking them for fair treatment, asking about their lives. Former guards responding, checking on how repatriation went, whether families were found. These relationships span decades. One Australian guard and a Japanese former prisoner exchange Christmas cards for 40 years. When the guard dies, his daughter continues the correspondence with the Japanese man's family. The cultural gap was never fully bridged. Australians never understood why the breakout happened. The prisoners were treated well, fed properly, not abused. A military inquiry confirmed it. No complaints had been filed. And yet, over 1,000 men chose suicide missions. The Japanese code of Bushido, the belief that capture is the ultimate dishonor, was incomprehensible to Western soldiers. Surrender when you're beaten is standard military practice. Live to fight another day. Go home when the war ends. But for many Japanese soldiers, there was no going home with honor intact. Death was preferable to the shame of captivity. Some Japanese prisoners at Cowra never told their families they'd been captured. They hid their identities, let loved ones believe they died in battle, because that was more honorable than admitting survival as a POW. One prisoner, after repatriation, took years to contact his mother. When he finally did, she wept. Not from joy, from shame. You should have died. His own mother. That's the cultural divide the Australians were trying to bridge. An ocean of incomprehension. But here's what Australia understood. They understood grief. They understood loss. They understood that young men die in wars they didn't start. And they understood that How you treat the dead, how you honor memory, says everything about who you are. So they built the cemetery, they planted the garden, they answered the letters. Not because they understood the breakout, they never did, but because dignity doesn't require understanding, it requires choice. 2004, 60th anniversary of the breakout. A ceremony is held. Australian veterans, Japanese veterans, local residents, dignitaries from both governments. Teruo Murakami, the last known survivor of the breakout, is there. He's 79 years old. He walks slowly through the Japanese cemetery, stops at graves of men he knew, men who died that night in August 1944. An Australian reporter asks him the question everyone wants answered. Why did they do it? Murakami is silent for a long moment. To reclaim honor. We had lost everything else. He pauses. But I learned later that honor isn't reclaimed by dying. It's proven by how you live afterward. An elderly Australian man approaches. Former guard, was on duty the night of the breakout. He extends his hand. Murakami takes it. They stand there, two old men who were enemies once. The guard speaks quietly. I shot at your friends that night. Murakami nods. I know. Were you injured? The guard shakes his head. No. You? Murakami lifts his shirt slightly. Shows a scar. Bayonet. During the chaos. Australian soldier. The guard looks stricken. I'm sorry. Murakami smiles sadly. We were at war. You did your job. I did mine. That's all. They walk together through the garden, cherry blossoms drifting down. The guard asks what Murakami did after the war. Became a teacher, taught history, made sure students understood what war actually costs. The guard nods. Good. We need that. Murakami stops at the memorial, looks at the names carved in stone. All these men, they believed in something. They were wrong, but they believed. The guard considers this. We all believed in something. Some beliefs are worth dying for, some aren't. The trick is knowing the difference before it's too late. 2023. Teruo Murakami dies at 98, the last survivor. With him goes the living memory of that night. No one left who charged the wire. No one left who saw it firsthand. But the garden remains. The cemetery remains. The relationships between Cowra and Japan remain. Every year, Cherry Blossom Festival. Every year, Australian school children visit the cemetery on field trips, learn about the breakout, learn about reconciliation, learn that enemies can become friends if someone is willing to take the first step. A grandmother brings her grandson to the garden. He's 10. He asks why there's a Japanese cemetery in Australia. She explains the breakout, the mass escape, the deaths. He's confused. But if they attacked us, why did we honor them? She smiles, because that's what good people do, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. He thinks about this. Did it work? Did it make things better? She gestures around the garden. You tell me. This used to be a place of death. Now it's a place of beauty. Japanese visitors come here and feel welcome. We tend their graves. They tend ours. That's not nothing. The boy walks ahead, stops at a stone lantern, touches it carefully. His grandmother watches. She lost her father in the Pacific War, never knew him. He died before she was born. For years she carried anger. Why should we honor Japanese dead when they killed her father? But then she visited Cowra, saw the cemetery, saw the garden, saw Australian volunteers maintaining Japanese graves with the same care they maintained Allied graves. And something shifted. The anger didn't disappear, but it stopped being the only thing she felt. Room opened for something else. Understanding, not forgiveness exactly, but acknowledgement. They were human too. They believed in wrong things. They did terrible things. But they were human. The parallel to Greta's story is striking. British serving tea to German prisoners. Australians honoring Japanese dead. Different wars, different enemies, same choice. To maintain humanity when everything argues for brutality, to choose dignity over vengeance, to prove that strength isn't measured only by the ability to destroy, but by the discipline to show mercy. In both cases, the effect was the same: confusion, then grudging respect, then transformation. German POWs returning to build democratic Germany, Japanese veterans teaching peace education. The weapon wasn't bombs or bullets, it was unexpected kindness from an enemy. That's what breaks through propaganda. That's what changes minds. Because you can dismiss the words of an enemy, but you can't dismiss their actions. When someone treats you with dignity after you tried to kill them, it forces a reckoning. Maybe everything I was taught was wrong. Maybe the enemy isn't what I thought. Australia chose to tend the graves, to build the garden, to answer the letters. And in doing so, they built something that outlasted the war. They built reconciliation. Not easy reconciliation. Not forget everything and move on reconciliation. But the hard kind, the kind that acknowledges harm, honors the dead, and still finds a way forward. The last veteran is gone, but the garden grows. Every spring, the cherry blossoms bloom. And every year, people walk through and learn the lesson. That the opposite of war isn't just peace. It's the choice to care for enemy graves. It's the decision to build beauty where blood was spilled. It's answering letters from men who once wanted you dead. It's standing in a garden planted on the site of a massacre and choosing not to let that be the end of the story. Cowra could have been a wound that never healed. Instead, it's a garden that never stops growing. And that's the most unusual side of all.